Hey, what's up, short attention span history nerds? My name is Mike Perry, and you're watching 10 Minute History. I want to start off by stating that revenge for any action belongs to God. Surprise, I'm a devout Christian. Evil is real, and it has been with us since the beginning of mankind's existence. Keep these two verses in mind. 1 Peter 3:9 states, "Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing, because this you were called so that you may inherit a blessing." And Deuteronomy 32:35 states, "It is mine to avenge. I will repay. In due time their foot will slip. Their day of disaster is near, and the doom rushes upon them." World War II's brutality is still hard to believe to this day. Just say the words World War II, and images of Nazis, concentration camps, storming the beaches, and aerial dogfights flood the mind. And even though we only have a handful of surviving soldiers now to tell their tales, we have countless videos and documentaries that keep the war alive in our minds. Atrocities occurred on all sides of the war, but none as bad as what these monsters did. I'm sorry, but if I say the word again, YouTube's gonna demonetize me. They like to pretend like certain words don't exist to keep people stupid. Anyway, the German N-words march across Europe surely falls into a category of horrific atrocities. The attempted destruction and genocide of all things Jewish is simply a form of horrific evil that only horrifically evil people can fathom to attempt. And just because a peace treaty is signed doesn't mean that the horrific war is over in many people's minds. Enter the Avengers. Seconds after the war was called to an end, some crafty individuals, pissed at the Germans' many atrocities, took matters into their own hands. One such person was a Polish man, barely out of his teens. This pimply-faced kid oversaw the murder of thousands of German civilians and prisoners of war, including as many as 800 children. After the war, there were Greeks, Ukrainians, Slovaks, French, Italians, and Hungarians and other citizens who, after being freed from their camps, refused to return home until they enacted their revenge. They wanted their pound of flesh. Now, most of my research comes from a book called Nakam. It details the organized attempts of Jews to avenge the Holocaust. Nakam means vengeance. The book tells the story of a group of survivors who stayed in Europe after the war and formed a clandestine group they called the Nokmim, or Avengers. The Avengers attempted to kill 6 million German citizens by poisoning the water supply of major German cities and by delivering bread laced with arsenic to German prisoners of war. The Avengers consisted of 50 Jews who had fought as partisans against the inward occupiers who, after Germany lost the war, committed themselves to avenging their families and friends and the destruction of their civilization. Now, it's impossible to imagine the trauma and horror that motivated these guys. After what they had witnessed and endured under Germany's genocidal occupation, they had to have been pissed with a piss beyond any type of piss you've ever experienced before. They were certain that the world was over for them. They described themselves as occasionally as zombie-like creatures, no longer human. They were animated only by the revenge that they had within them. As the Avenger Poldek Wasserman put it, instead of suicide, after you arrived home, you found that no one was left and that the scope of the vengeance was beyond bearable. Then came vengeance. Vengeance was a kind of suicide because afterward, there would certainly be no sense in staying alive. Abba Kovner, the leader of the Avengers, also framed the group's plot as a suicidal response to a world that had become unlivable. Decades later, he wrote, "I will not claim that our thinking was far from deranged in those days, maybe worse than deranged. A terrifying idea made wholly from despair and carrying a sort of suicide with it. Deranged and terrifying though the idea was, the Avengers shared a total commitment to their goal of revenge. They were also motivated by more than just suicidal rage, grief, and despair. And they feared that Germany's defeat was temporary and wasn't permanent, and that the Holocaust was not over. After all, Germany was defeated in World War I and came back stronger than ever during World War II. They felt as though they had to act quickly in order to preserve the last vestige of European Judaism from being wiped out forever. They also had to act before Germany had a chance to regroup and accomplish the goal of world domination. After the war, the Avengers saw gangs of former N-words together with criminal elements and wartime collaborators continuing to kill Jews. They band together as if Hitler's mandate had never ended. Many Jews returned to their homes only to be murdered by their neighbors. In the Lithuanian city of this, 5 survivors were killed by anonymous assailants. Their bodies were placed with a handwritten note that read, "This will be the fate of all Jews left alive." One survivor, Jesse Smollett, said he was just on his way to a Subway sandwich shop when 2 men jumped out with MAGA hats and a pipe in their hand and said, "You should have chose Quiznos." Rumors began swirling throughout Europe that the formation of a new clandestine German forces organization known as the Werewolf Unit. The Werewolf Unit? Really? I bet they were on Team Jacob. Anyways, their mission was to continue fighting for Nazi ideology. The Avengers believed that only mass violence would make Europe's mass violent anti-Semites think twice about spilling more Jewish blood. Because normally that works, right? Begin indiscriminately killing people known to be mentally unstable and heavily armed, and they just roll over and play dead. While traveling across Europe in 1945 and 1946, often under forged documents or with the help of the Jewish Brigade in the British military, the Avengers settled on 2 ways to accomplish their goals. Now, Plan A, the discriminate murder of 6 million Germans, was to involve infiltrating and poisoning the municipal water supply of major German cities. Plan B, the mass execution of SS and Gestapo veterans, took a similar shape with a plot to deliver poisonous bread to Allied POW camps. But how to procure the necessary poisons? Aha! In August 1945, Abba Kovner set sail for the Jewish community of Palestine, then under British administration, to find the support the Avengers would need. Once in Palestine, Kovner willfully misled the highest leaders of the Palestinian Jewish community by insinuating that the Avengers planned only to target war criminals. Convinced by his big fat lie, they supported the Avengers operation, with the understanding that the poison would only be used to kill SS veterans and not German citizens. 2 scientists provided Kovner with a quantity of arsenic sufficient to kill over 10 million people, but still insufficient enough to kill Chuck Norris. Now, despite his claims, Kovner intended to use the poison to fulfill the mission of killing all Germans, men, women, and children. As he reflected years later, I lied with a clear conscience. Not for a moment, not even to this day, have I had any doubt that Plan A was correct and was necessary. And while he was lying to the men who would soon run the state of Israel, an Avenger named Willik Shenar, a Polish Jew who was his family's sole survivor, began working under a false identity at a water purification plant that served Nuremberg and formed a detailed plan to pump the poison into the water supply. So on December 14th, 1945, Kovner set sail for France from Alexandria, Egypt, identifying himself as a discharged British soldier. He carried a bag that held 12 powdered milk cans filled with arsenic, which he would bring to Nuremberg. But as his ship neared France, a bunch of British military came on board looking for him and 4 other men traveling from Palestine on false documents. In a panic, Kovner threw the bags of arsenic into the sea. Okay, stop the video. How did this not poison the entire Mediterranean Sea? If it was going to poison all of Nuremberg, it would have at least killed a few fishermen in the Mediterranean Sea, and we would have heard about it. But it's not my story, so I'll continue. When Kovner's comrades in Europe learned of his arrest and the loss of his poison, they quickly switched to Plan B. Some 2,000 SS soldiers became ill, and hundreds were hospitalized with gastrointestinal distress, but none of them died. It seemed that the ones baking the bread were afraid of inhaling the arsenic, so they just put a little pinch in each one. So instead of killing the prisoners, they gave them tummy aches and a little diarrhea. Damn, I'm glad the movie The Avengers was more successful at their mission. Imagine the Hulk smashing mutants, only to give them minor bruises and little boo-boos. Might as well just have David Banner running around hitting people. Anyways, 2.5 months later, all the Avengers were sailing for Palestine, having failed to accomplish even a fraction of their spectacular, violent revenge they were desperate for. I bet that was one hell of a pity party, too. But after failing to kill a gazillion Germans, they gave up and re-entered society to live out the rest of their lives in anonymity. Well, that is until Porat wrote a book about them and brought their embarrassing failure to the mainstream reading public. Fortunately, it's a history book. Very few people read them. Now, I will say that most of the book consists of the Avengers' precise logistical preparations for their plans and the complex, often tense relationships between the militant group and Palestine's Jewish leaders. These will likely be of interest only to specialists in modern Jewish and European history, like myself. Which is why most of the world has never heard of them. But the book's concluding section, which surveys the Avengers' more recent reflections on their plot to kill 6 million Germans, might be of interest, especially since they all still want revenge. This is why being so focused on revenge is unhealthy. In 2010, she interviewed the aging Avenger Edith Friedman. The interview was almost over when he suddenly flips out, gets to the edge of his seat, and his eyes are fixed on this bookshelf, and from his throat he howls, why was the operation stopped? Father and mother will never forgive me for not doing anything. Mama, Papa, I did nothing. They stripped themselves and shot them. I went home and the place was empty. We had 7 children. My uncle had 10. We should have tried again and again. Now, 10 years have passed since the last Avenger died. Their stories are not mainstream. If you ask anyone today if they've ever heard of the Avengers, you're going to get a yes, and then an explanation as to why Iron Man is more powerful than the Hulk and which one their favorite Avenger is. But if you ask them if they've ever heard of the post-World War II Jewish group of 50 called the Avengers, you're more likely to get a puzzled look and told that they don't like music from that time period. The fact is, they didn't succeed. All their plans of mass German extermination have been relegated to a footnote of World War II. I, for one, am glad that they failed their mission. Murdering murderers does not make one a hero. It simply makes you a murderer. Well, that's the 10-minute history version of the Jewish Avengers. If you have any thoughts on them, please let me know in the comments section. If there's any other historical groups of people you would like me to do a video on, please leave that in the comment section too. And if you like short history videos with humor and sarcasm, please consider subscribing to 10-Minute History. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button. If you hated it, hit the thumbs down button. Either way, I get to know what subject you guys like or dislike. Thank you for watching. Until next time. The book tells the story of a group of survivors who stayed in Europe after the war and filmed a... Why do I keep saying filmed? They didn't film anything. Abba Kovner, the leader of the Avengers, also... Sorry, my back itches. The Avengers believed that only mass violence would make Europe's violent anti-Semitites. There's no such thing as an anti-Semitite.